Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, Roofing Company Tries to Extort My Roommates and Me for Parking. Gets Denied. I live in a city where street parking is the primary source of parking. I was lucky enough to find a house that had a driveway for my use, and shared this driveway with my two roommates. We all worked different schedules, had different days off, and sometimes walked to work. This meant that at any given point, we had 3 cars in the driveway, single file, and frequently had 1 or more cars in the driveway all day. The driveway was included in our lease as our responsibility and part of our property, save for the innermost end where our landlord had a detached garage she used for storage. That garage and the 10 feet in front of it were in her jurisdiction, but the entire driveway leading into that area belonged to the renters. Our house and the apartment building next door frame our driveway on either side. One morning, I'm getting ready to walk to work when I hear a knock on the door. I answer, and there are 2 random men on my porch. They tell me that I need to move my car because my landlord, LL, gave the neighboring apartment building permission to use our driveway while it is getting its roof replaced. I call my LL to see what's up, and she tells me that the owner of the apartment building had asked her if they could use the driveway to park a dumpster while the roofing company, RC, worked. She'd given them permission to use the 10 feet in front of the garage, but told them we had the rights to the driveway and that they'd need to get separate permission from us to use the driveway. I tell LL they hadn't asked, and now I have 2 men on my porch and a full cadre of roofers dependent on me moving my car, which I hadn't planned to move, and she verbally shrugs and tells me to work it out with them. I told them that I'd move my car that day, but they needed to compensate me for any and all parking fees. Mistake. My job didn't have a parking lot, and street parking cost upwards of $15 to $20 per day. As a newer graduate of grad school, I had a lot of debt and not a lot of disposable income. My roommates are in similar situations. I didn't want to pay for parking on top of all my other bills, so the RC agrees to repay all parking fees as long as I keep my receipts. RC also states that they'll be done within a week, and that they only need to get the dumpster in, then my roommates and I will have full access to the driveway again. Sounded reasonable. As you probably figure, given that I'm posting here, this is not what happened. On any given day during the month-and-a-half-long construction, the RC woke my roommates or me up to have us move our cars out of the driveway so they could park their trucks in it. We went from being assured we'd have full access to our driveway to being told that they'd be throwing objects from the roof to the dumpster, and that if they happened to hit our cars with projectiles and damage them, then that was our liability that we assumed by parking there. I don't believe any of this is legally true, but also knew that it was unlikely that I'd have the time or money to pursue a claim. They assured us that they would work from 8 to 5 each day and be done by the time we were back from work. Yet my roommates were often left circling the neighborhood to find parking while RC worked until 7 or 8 o'clock. Some days, we would preemptively move our cars, only to have the RC not show up to work at all that day. It wasted a lot of our time and cost us way more in parking than we'd anticipated. On to the revenge aspect. On our end, my roommates and I kept a log of every time they asked us to vacate the driveway. Every time they blocked the driveway and prevented us from parking. We kept every receipt we had for parking on the street or in a lot. We kept a log of every conversation we had with the company and the promises they made. I emailed our LL after every conversation to keep her in the loop on our negotiations, because she'd screwed us over pretty handily in this scenario and tried to pass the buck on any responsibility for it. She was supportive of our decisions, but also firm that she would take no part in the negotiations. We also kept a log of the conversations we had with the apartment building owner. Side note. He was adamant that the cost of parking wasn't a big deal and that we should just eat it. When I balked at that statement, said that he'd work out a deal with the grocery store across the street to have them set aside 3 permanent parking spots for our use. This grocery store rhymes with Vader Hose and is notorious for having insufficient parking for its own customers. I laughed and asked him to let me know how that negotiation goes. He, unsurprisingly, never responded. We also wrote up a memo detailing the agreement we'd made with the RC foreman. They'd agreed to repay us all parking fees, a $25 fee every time they asked us to move cars before 8 or after 5, and also agreed to pay us for every day they went over schedule. Does this agreement seem too good to be true? That's because it was. It became clear as the project wore on that the RC had no intention of paying us anything for the parking or inconvenience. My roommates and I saw that they were nearing the end of the construction and discussed what we were going to do. Each of us had amassed $100 or so in parking fees, and we knew they were going to try and run. One morning, sure enough, I left the house and a man I'd never seen on the site runs up to me and demands that I move my and my roommate's car so they can remove the dumpster. The project is done. I told him we would just as soon as we received our payment, as agreed. This man claimed to be a personal friend of the apartment building manager, F, and calls over a man he says is the RC owner, O. Neither one of these men has ever been on site before this day, nor have they been present for any of the conversations about parking. So of course, they claim complete ignorance to the conversations and the agreement, and accuse me of extortion. F is a real lovely piece of work who uses every condescending argument to try and intimidate and scare me. He calls me, little girl, in every accusation, and threatens to sue me. I tell him that I'd be happy to be sued. I've kept a log of every interaction and have written, dated materials backing up those conversations, as well as time-stamped emails detailing the conversations to my LL. Oh, and I'm also a lawyer. I don't practice, but that wasn't necessary for him to know right then. F and O argue with my roommate and me for over an hour. I called her outside for support. If I was going to get tag-teamed, I wanted my own partner. They tried everything from screaming us down, to belittling us, to pleading poverty and asking us if we were really going to bankrupt this poor RC because of our heartlessness. They tried everything. F argued that we didn't deserve to get paid because we were technically able to park in the driveway at all times. We just chose not to because of the liability. O argued, at the same time, that we didn't deserve to get paid because there were days our cars were in the driveway and that liability prevented the RC from working. When we pointed out that hypocrisy, they moved on to the next tactic. The thing was, though, that this whole issue arose because the RC and the apartment building owner never applied for the parking permits to reserve street spots for the trucks. This whole issue was premised on the fact that RC didn't do the preliminary work necessary for doing a construction job in a big city, and were attempting to force their way through a project that they didn't have the permits to complete. As soon as my roommate and I reminded F and O of that fact, they backed down and got the money to pay us back. There was no profit to be made from this scenario, but we did get enough to repay us for all of the parking fees and all of the time we had to take moving our cars and accommodating their project. The RC foreman sent us an email calling us heartless witches and asked us why we were so mean. We replied politely thanking RC for paying us back the money due and advised them that their right to use the driveway was terminated by 5 o'clock that day. If the dumpster was still in the driveway after then, we'd call to have it towed. Next one is titled, Pretend to Me to Receive Free Electricity? Get Yourself Arrested. Backstory. Many years ago, I opened my electricity bill to find it significantly larger than I normally paid. Upon closer inspection, I noticed they had added an electricity service at an address I had never resided at. I contacted the customer service line of the supplier to query the bill and advised them that I never lived in the address they had added to the bill. They advised me that they did not make an error and the bill stands. I was told I must pay the bill or it would be sent to collections. No amount of pleading had changed their minds and the customer service officer did not give me an alternative. Note. To avoid this being too long, I will summarize conversations. Note. In order to connect electricity in our country, Australia, you need to advise them of your license number along with your date of birth, etc. I had coffee with my friend when I began sobbing about my predicament with the electricity. She asked me who would have access to my license details. I then remembered that I hired a costume months earlier for a theme party, which required a copy of my license. We rang the costume shop. I asked the lovely owner of the costume shop if anyone had access to my license details. She asked why. I began telling her my predicament. She was shocked and angry. She told me they had a break-in at her shop and lost some merchandise along with a few copies of people's licenses. Lovely owner suspected a former employee of the break-in but didn't have proof. The former employee had been sacked due to theft previously, not sure what she stole. My friend and I were on a mission. Armed with the address details of where this person resided, we headed to the residence. Upon arriving, we decided to ask the neighbors in the apartment block about the person who lived in that apartment. Apparently, they had been evicted. The neighbor I spoke to gladly gave me the details of the rental agent. Friend and I turned up at the rental agent who let us know not only the name but why they were evicted. It was for unpaid rent. Bingo, we had proof. It was the same person who the lovely owner at the costume shop told us she suspected had stolen the costumes and licenses. We headed to the costume shop and advised the lovely owner the proof we found, including contact details of rental agent. Before leaving the shop, she let us know that she is calling the police and telling them everything. I rang supplier to advise them on our findings and let them know that there will be charges laid on this person for theft and identity fraud. Luckily, they wiped the bill after I submitted a legal statement to them with all details. Lovely owner of costume shop contacted me and excitedly told me the person had been arrested. I didn't find out the outcome as I wanted to put the whole mess behind me. Last one is titled, "Abuse me and my mother for years, keep us out of our home, and stop me from getting a haircut? Enjoy having an entire neighborhood kick your butt and steal your crap." This happened way back in 2011, ducking hell. This happened in 2010. I graduated in 2011, which is why I'm fixated on that date. Sorry. The reason I'm compelled to share this now is because I graduate soon with my MS degree in mechanical engineering. My grades sucked all through high school, in many ways, due to Michael, the subject of this post, and I've struggled with depression and anxiety over the years. I shared this story with my girlfriend this morning and she was shocked at it. I just never thought to share it before. She told me to post it here. My mom dated a guy named Michael from the time I was 7 until December 17, 2010. I had just recently turned 18 and was in my last year of high school. Michael was a person who did not deal well with issues he had from his own abusive upbringing. I've been a shitty person before myself and I'm sure I still have a lot of room to improve, so I never like to speak poorly of people because I think it can be accurately assumed that most people have a good reason for being the way they are. It's not an excuse, but I don't think people are bad. I think bad circumstances condition people to behave badly. Michael was a severe alcoholic, he was childish, he was obsessed with knives, would talk about how he wished he could gut people alive, hung around violent criminals and took me around them as a child, and he was extremely verbally and emotionally abusive to my mother. My mother wanted him to be my dad though, so to his credit he filled the dad role as best he could, but the best he could do was to teach me extremely unhealthy relationship dynamics and how to glorify violence and bravado. At the end of high school my mom's mom died and left my mom a house. The house is decently sized, and while it's still in the ghetto, it's in as safe a part of the ghetto as there is. Everyone that lives in this corner of the city has been here for decades and we all know each other very well. We're like a big family, but we keep to ourselves unless invited in by others. We respect boundaries and that's what makes this small community a good one. Now, important to note, my neighbors and older bros are not angels. These people are violent criminals in their own right. But they were on my side and this is important. So the house. It was left to me and my mother. Michael refused to let us enter the home. My mom and I lived in the smallest, shittiest apartment in the most violent part of the city. And, for 18-year-old me, I'd only just begun to reflect on life and realize how shitty Michael, and my narcissistic mother, had been towards me. I was fed up and living in this disgusting, violent apartment was just fueling my rage every second. One day, I was especially furious. I don't know why, I just woke up in an absolute quiet rage. Contained myself through the school day and I was just fixated on getting a haircut. That was my goal for the day. Just get a haircut, get home, go to bed. And it's very important to note that I'm in a boot for a badly sprained ankle at this time. That comes up later. My mom throws a monkey wrench in my plans. See, she was sure Michael was cheating on her again. So she demanded I go over to the house I grew up in, that he kicked us out of to inspect and see if there was another woman, or if there was evidence of other women being in the home. I protest but to no avail. And at this point I'm about an inch from exploding. I drive over to the house and I knock at the door for 7 minutes. This pushed me to about 1/2 of an inch from explosion. I grew up in the house. I ducking knew the acoustics of it. I don't care if you're in the last room upstairs at the back of the house. If someone lightly taps the front door, you hear that crap. So I knew he was making me wait as some show of dominance that this was his house. He eventually unlocks the door and I push it open and push him back in the process. He yells out and asks me what was wrong, and I responded in saying that I was there to make sure he wasn't ducking anyone else in my grandma's house. Now, I'm a pretty large guy. And Michael was small. Even back then I dwarfed him. But I've always been a gentle giant, as my mom says. I'd never gotten into a fight, almost never raised my voice or asserted myself with anyone. So for me to respond so firmly and disrespectfully, with no concern for how he felt, he backed off a bit in that moment. I noticed that. I began walking through every room of the house. I was finding nothing and no one, and I was fine with this. Remember, my goal is the haircut. That's all I want out of life right now. And then I get to my grandma's old bedroom. I open the door and it slams back in my face. Then out steps Michael's brother, who was about my size, and he says to me, "Ain't nothing for you in there." I remember being so angry, it was like past the point of an explosion. I described it to my girlfriend as pure rage and malevolence, yet restrained. I had this black expression on my face, turned around and walked downstairs, and I told Michael in a calm voice, "Get your brother and leave now. I've had enough of you in my life." Michael then, believing I was intimidated by his brother, gets in my face and starts to scream and curse and threaten me. I stood there honest to God, just looking at him like a lion looks at the weak, small, destructible gazelle. Literally thinking to myself, I can break you. He then yells at me to get the duck out my house. All of a sudden I was snapped out of this trance state and I responded and said, "You have no house. You're homeless now. Get your brother and leave." He must have, again, recognized that his brother was all the way upstairs and I was inches away from him. But he's in too deep now. He has to commit lest his pride be wounded. So he says, "Oh, you think I'm a witch, huh?" And of course I responded, "I think you're a homeless witch." He then turns around and just keeps repeating, "You think I'm a witch?" He eventually comes back with 2 knives in his hands. I see this, and at this moment I'm very seriously okay with the thought of dying right then and there. Life had always been crap and I couldn't even get my damn haircut. This part still makes me cry even right now. So I told him, "You're going to have to kill me the first time you swing at me with those." Then his brother comes downstairs. I never took my eyes off of Michael. His brother stands on the stairs a few feet away from Michael, and Michael drops the knives and tries to tackle me and push me out of the house. I slip a little because of the boot, but once I get a little friction under the boot, it literally feels like when your little cousin, sibling tries to fight you. In that moment, I thought about how I was about to destroy this man. His brother must have seen me smile, because then he jumped in and started pushing me as well. I don't know if I was stronger than I thought or if the rage gave me an adrenaline rush, but I was pushing them both back. Michael's brother then starts to kick my boot, which both hurt my ankle and made me slip back. That, coupled with them pushing, eventually pushed me out of the front door, off the porch, and down the stairs onto the ground in front of the house. And this is the angriest I have ever been in my life. I was angry to the point where I would have gladly hurt myself to hurt them. I got so overcome with emotion, I started to cry and my breathing got erratic. Michael and his brother were taunting me as this happened, and I just started to take off the boot. I didn't want the haircut anymore, I wanted both of them hurt or dead. The next thing I notice is that people started surrounding me. I'm still struggling to regain motor control and take off the damn boot, and then 2 of my older brothers from the neighborhood, Jiggy and Tyrone, kneeled down and consoled me. Jiggy asked me what was wrong and what happened. I told them about all the crap Michael had done over the years and what happened that day. When I got to the end, Tyrone said, "Hold up Lil, Chris. These motherduckers put you out of Miss Mama, what everyone used to call my grandma, house. After you told them to leave? Then both Jiggy and Tyrone started taking their shirts off and told me they'd take care of them if I said it. And I then heard all the stirring behind me. Damn near the entire block was in our yard or in the street in front of our yard. And they were all calling out support. He ain't gone, do you like that, Lil Chris? Not on this street. And things like that. I looked up at Michael and his brother and I could see the fear on their faces. I just shook my head yes and said not to kill them. Jiggy and Tyrone ran in the house after them and dragged them out into the front yard. Then a circle pretty much formed around them and it was just the most spectacular beatdown I'd ever seen. After that, Jiggy said they'd help me take all their crap out of the house and told me to keep the crap I liked. So I did exactly that. I went in with like 10 people. I gave some crap away to them, kept some crap, and pretty much just gave Michael and his brother the clothes no one else wanted. They ended up leaving their clothes. Here's why. The next door neighbor was this old veteran. Real gritty, no-nonsense old guy named Alvin. Alvin walked out with his shotgun. He walked over to these two bloody pulps on the lawn and said, "Now got the duck off my street." And he literally just yelled at them to get up and run or crawl or roll to get off of the block. He followed them stumbling up to the main road and then he calmly walked back. And that was the last day I ever saw or heard from either of them. The next few years were hell. Mom blamed me for ruining her relationship, and I had to unlearn all the terrible crap I'd been taught in life and start to go to school and get my life in order. Things are better now. Thanks for listening.